Good evening, I am Sana Khan. Welcome to another edition of Gravitas, a show where we deconstruct the news of the day and get you perspectives on big issues. On the discussion tonight, Morocco bans the burqa apparently over security concerns, but will banning of the full face veil help tackle terror? That's coming up later on the show, but first we get you a WION exclusive. The Swat Valley in northwestern region of Pakistan, controlled by Taliban for long, is showing stirrings of normalcy. But the Taliban may not be fully out of the region, not as yet. Here's a story on why the Taliban fear still haunts the valley.
Swat, a picturesque valley in the northwestern region of Pakistan, has experienced Taliban control over the years. Despite the Taliban being ousted from the region in 2009 in a major military operation, locals fear a resurgence of the deadly group. Maulana Fazlullah, the ruthless cleric and militant commander who led the original Swat uprising in 2007, has evaded capture and risen to greater heights as the supreme leader of the Pakistani Taliban. The group was back in the headlines after the 2012 attempted assassination of Nobel laureate Malala Yousafzai. In the last few years, small pockets of fighters have reportedly infiltrated back into Swat, moving along remote mountain trails on horseback and on foot. The Taliban have struggled to build ideological support among the valley's 2 million residents after imposing a harsh version of Islamic law during their bloody 2-year rule. They have been more active in other parts of the country, such as in southern Balochistan province, where a faction of the Taliban and Islamic State claimed responsibility for a series of bomb and gun attacks that killed more than 180 people. According to latest reports, more than 4,000 Pakistani soldiers are stationed in Swat. In November 2016, the army began constructing a permanent garrison there. Officials say more than 2,000 Taliban fighters from Swat have been driven into mountainous areas across the Afghan border. Despite international pressure, Pakistan has not been successful in wiping out the terror group from the valley. Bureau Report, WION.
All right, first up, let me go across live to our Pakistan Bureau Chief, Taha Siddiqui. Taha, you were very recently in the Swat Valley. Is it a fact that the fear of Taliban still haunts the people there in the valley?
Well, definitely. We have seen that also the violence in recent times is once again increased. And this is basically a different kind of violence. Earlier, there was a sort of a mass violence and large-scale killings that we saw when the Taliban were occupying the area. But now the nature of that violence has changed in the sense that it has become more targeted, and the Taliban are targeting actually very sort of those prominent personalities, police officials, army officials, and so they have a very coordinated and very planned out sort of a strategy right now. And as the report that was previously running also mentions, Fazlullah, who was basically the chief of the Swat Taliban region, has now become the chief of the Pakistani Taliban. So he has more people, sort of more recruits under him. He's commanding more recruits under him. So in that sense, he has more sort of his people or his cadre have more mobility to move in and out of Swat Valley. And we do know that in the neighboring areas around Swat are where the problem still lies, and that's what the military did. They pushed them out, did not really eliminate them, and now they keep coming back in because many of them are actually local residents who've just fled for the time being.
Right, and Taha, you know, what do the locals over there say? Are they scared? What are the telltale signs of the presence of Taliban in the Swat? If you can very briefly throw some light on that.
Well, the locals have a sort of a sense of relief in the sense that what they went through and what now the thing is more relative sort of peace and calm right now. But then again, the military still controls the place. There's military everywhere. Their entry and exit points of Swat Valley are still controlled by the military. So because of that, a lot of people do complain that there's this heavy footprint of the military in the area, and because of which, for locals and civilians, there's issues of mobility. Also, at the same time, the people know that the military has to be there because of the security concerns, but they wonder when this military sort of control will end and it will come back to the civilians that it's used to be. Also, a lot of people have been displaced because of the military's presence in the area. The military is building a garrison, as we know in the report we saw.
Right.
The military is also building its presence, heavier presence, and because of that, people are also complaining about that aspect.
All right, Taha, do stay with me. I'm going to come back to you in just a bit. Despite all of this in the Swat Valley, there's reason to believe that a semblance of normalcy is returning to the beautiful valley. Peace has prevailed in the Swat Valley since the Pakistani army drove out the Taliban. Tourism has seen a modest revival and many residents have returned. Yet, there are signs, as we showed you earlier, that the Taliban is trying to make a comeback. Threats have been made. Locals have been targeted for not cooperating. Let's take a look at this report filed by Taha from the Swat Valley.
Pakistan's scenic Swat Valley has seen a major revival of fortunes after the army, in an operation spearheaded by tanks, troops and airstrikes, drove out the Taliban.
They destroyed the hotel and chairlift facility. The hotel was completely bombed. We never thought business would return, but we are happy that tourism is now reviving here.
Many tourists visiting this ski resort had apprehensions about coming here, given its recent history of Taliban occupation. But they were pleasantly surprised to find their fears were misplaced.
I could not have imagined it to be like this. The people are happy here. It seems they have forgotten what happened. There is usually post-trauma or depression after such violence, but I did not find that. Of course, the security is still tight, but the locals generally seem to have moved on.
We had heard that the Taliban had occupied this region, but then the Pakistan army rebuilt this place and has brought peace.
The Pakistan army continues to manage the valley, and under its strict watch, there has been relative peace. The provincial government recently demanded that the army hand back control of the valley, but military refused, citing security concerns. Tourism is slowly reviving in the Swat Valley, but the Taliban are trying to make a comeback. Targeted killings are once again on the rise, and locals have received threatening calls from the Taliban demanding extortion from them. Ijaz Khan lost his father Muhammad to such a targeted killing in May 2016. Muhammad was heading a local village defense committee which was formed to keep watch after the military had cleared out the Taliban from the area. Ijaz says his father had received threats and was worried.
Just a few days before he was killed, he instructed all of us to pray at home and not go to the mosque. He said, if you want to go to the mosque, don't stay out too late because I have received threats. The authorities have also communicated to me saying that my life is in danger as some people are trying to target me.
Owing to these threats, other village defense committee members are now taking precautions. Fazal Wahab is one such resident of Swat who carries a weapon whenever he leaves home. His family has advised him to leave his job, but he wants to continue fighting the Taliban. Many of his friends have even left the country.
My family tells me to stop doing this peace work. My mother is suffering from depression because of these threats from the terrorists. Many of the Defense Committee members have left Swat and migrated to the Middle East. The ones who are better off financially have even escaped to Europe.
A force of more than 4,000 Pakistani soldiers is currently stationed in Swat, and in November, the army began building a permanent garrison in the valley. Despite that, the violence continues to haunt the locals, raising questions about the effectiveness of the military's continued presence in the region. In Swat, Taha Siddiqui with cameraman Rao Bilal for WION.
All right, also joining me on the show tonight is Professor Sarfaraz Khan from the Peshawar University. He joins us live from Peshawar. Thank you so much, Professor Khan, for speaking to us here on WION. I will come to you in just a few minutes, but first, Taha, would you say, as we've seen in your report, that whatever we're seeing in the valley is the modest revival of tourism, anyway, a return to peaceful times there?
Well, that's definitely one of the sort of silver linings that we're seeing, or sort of the hope that locals have, because Swat was known for that tourism before 2007, and a lot of people used to come. Even end of this January, there is an announcement of an international skiing competition at that particular place where we visited also in the report, which is called Malam Jabba, an international skiing competition happening for the first time ever since the Taliban left the region and the military came in. So in that sense, there is this sense of and then this push by the authorities to revive the tourism. But lurking behind that push and lurking behind that sort of hope is the violence that we discuss in the form of targeted killings, and then also extortion calls that are being made. But again, I mean, so it's kind of a right now we can say it could go either way in the coming days. But the Taliban are mostly sort of been in other parts of Pakistan also have been defeated or have been pushed out.
Right.
But they still managed to come in through Afghanistan because Pakistan shares a border with them. So because of that, the problem still persists.
Right. Professor Khan, what do you think of the situation as of now in the Swat Valley? Have Pakistan's efforts there been sincere?
As far as situation in Swat right now is concerned, a semblance of normalcy in that sense is that the area had been earlier occupied fully by the Taliban, and they had imposed every version of theirs about Islam on men and women and children. Schools were shut, many were destroyed, and hospitals were shut. You could not move freely, and you had to carry a turban and beard and many other things. That is history now. Pakistan Army, with the help of local defenders of peace in their villages, were able to drive the hardcore Taliban out, or some of them were killed or arrested. They might be in safe havens somewhere. We had military courts for the 2 years. Their period is just ending, and very few convictions we had, not much. So there might be
right.
a situation that those who are right now in detention or in safe houses might be released at some point, and the target killing, which off and on happens right now, might increase in future. There might be a real danger because once the military courts are ended, and we haven't yet decided the fate of many terrorists, so then the situation hangs in the balance.
All right. Also, Professor Khan, looking at the recent developments, we saw what's happening in the valley. A skiing resort is, bustling with visitors. An international competition is due to be organized over there. Plus, Pakistan is up, its military presence in the Swat Valley has been successful in driving at least 2,000 Taliban fighters out into the mountainous regions. Do you think, taking all these factors into account, that Pakistani establishment is serious as far as rebuilding civilian institutions is concerned and its fight against Taliban's radical ideology?
It will be very unfortunate if the Pakistan Army and the Pakistani state is not able to dispel the impression that they are not serious and there are still good or bad Talibans. Because people of Swat and Dir and Bunair, that is Malakand division, had carried a deep grievance against the state that they were not able to defend the ordinary citizens, men and women of Swat and Malakand division. They were killed, maimed, and had to be displaced from their hometowns. Even elderly women had to leave at one point their houses. So
Right.
they carry a deep grievance, and they want that all sorts of terrorists must be eliminated. Eliminated, the word they use normally. And they don't want that the impression that some forces and the Taliban were the same. It should be again strengthened. So they want peace in their area, and they want peace in the adjoining Afghanistan too. And they want terrorists to be eliminated,
Right.
not only in Swat and Dir and in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or Fata, but
Also,
in
Professor
their
Khan, do you see, because there are so many people in the villages, do some of them at least have their tacit support to Taliban in the valley? Do you think that is a possibility?
Somehow earlier, if we knew that some people are supportive of them, now in the open no one dares to support them. Rather, those who somehow are found having some sympathy to them, they are thought to be either stooges of the foreign powers or stooges of the Rouge element in the agencies which were earlier supporting them. So people are very angry about them, and the local people don't want to return to those situations when everything was imposed upon them. And that's why they are tolerating, rather supporting at times, the military force there. And even when the cantonment is being built there was not severe opposition to that, because people think that it is necessary that there should be a clear distinction that the state is the only force there, and extra state forces, non-state actors are fully eliminated.
All
and
right.
Pakistan has nothing to do with them.
All right, Professor Khan, do stay with me. I'm going to come back to you. Taha, we spoke earlier about the shift in tactics of the Taliban, how from big attacks, statement attacks, they've now come to targeted killings. But do you think the action taken by the Pakistani military and the arrest that we've seen in the recent past there by the police, that the number of attacks, they've gone down there in the region?
Well, as far as figures for targeted killings are concerned in the Swat Valley, they've actually increased in the last few years. I mean, ever since we've seen, and it started with one of the most high-profile assassination attempts that we saw was of Malala's in 2012. And then after that, following that, we've seen this sort of campaign by the Taliban to target, kill people, and it has been increasing. And this has been the tactic, and not just in Swat Valley, it's happening in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa also. And one of the reasons why they're able to carry out these kind of activities is sometimes analysts believe is because of the fact that still the Pakistani state sort of differentiates between the Taliban, which are fighting forces across the border, and the Taliban, which are fighting against Pakistan. So the good and the bad Taliban, there's still that distinction. And sometimes because of that distinction, the bad Taliban get support from the good Taliban, get refuge from the good Taliban, and they manage to operate in these areas, especially in the northwestern part of Pakistan.
All right, Taha, do stay with me. Professor Khan, since 2009, Pakistan has used Swat as the example of a successful military operation to save its image there internationally. But would you agree that the bigger challenge is now to hold the area and to establish civilian authority?
You are absolutely right. This area, Swat, Dir, Buner, they were formerly princely states which are known as Pata, that is provincially administered tribal areas. And in this area, there had been a civilian administration functioning. Before 1969, they had some autonomy and their prince was ruling them. But after that, Pakistani state created their own institutions, police and other institutions, and they were functional. And Swat had been the most peaceful area in the entire Pakistan, and it was a tourist hub as well. So the situation worsened when the Afghan war, especially the era of Mujahideen and Taliban, actually these terrorists peeped in from our tribal areas, and extremist madrasas
Right.
headed by Sufi Muhammad and others, actually endangered the peace here. So once the extremist narrative is fought by a progressive liberal narrative, and that is actually will stop extremism and terrorism in the area. What we find that after the military operation, the
Right.
narrative which the Taliban and extremists brought in was not defeated yet, and the counter narrative is not yet fully owned by the state of Pakistan.
All right, Professor Khan as well as Taha, do stay with me. Now, the fact that the memories of violent Taliban days still continue to haunt the valley is not without reason. Memories of Taliban rule over the beautiful Swat Valley are too recent to be forgotten. Here's a glimpse of those grim days.
On the 9th of October 2012, the Taliban shot me on the left side of my forehead.
Recall these images dating back to October 2012, when Malala Yousafzai, then 14 years old, was shot in the head by a Taliban gunman for the crime of blogging, for the crime of wanting education for girls. She was running against the tide, for in 2008 itself, local Taliban leader Mullah Fazlullah had warned against education for girls and threatened dire consequences against schools that ignored him. Taliban justice or punishment for wrongs real or imagined was swift and brutal. It spared no one young or old, and even girls were whipped in full public view. The Swat Valley became a training ground for the Taliban and subsequently other terror groups. Today, although relative peace prevails, the scenic valley could see a return of those forces opposed to moderation, unless the Pakistan government is able to hold its ground. Bureau Report, WION.
Now, let me come to you, Taha. After the military operation there, we saw militants who had fled the Swat. They regrouped across the border in the Kunar and the regions of Nuristan, provinces of Afghanistan. Now, if we talk about the gun attack on Malala, the assassination attempt, do you think that that was perhaps the turning point, a daring attack that brought back the fear among villagers there?
Definitely. I mean, that was that is in the memory of everyone over there. And Malala then went on to survive that attempt, and then also has been active internationally, globally with regards to education. And she keeps talking about Pakistan from different global platforms, and keeps talking about Swat Valley. But sadly, the thing is that she cannot return back to her valley still, because the threats to her still exist. And even very recently we saw other Taliban commanders saying that she should not come back, and we will target her if she does come back. So in that sense, there is a lot of fear, and given that her case became very high profile, so it's always a sort of a reminder in Swat that violence can come back anytime, and these elements, these militant networks are still active and sort of probably in a sleeping cell mode right now, but can be reactivated, and we have seen that happening.
Right. Professor Khan, as you were talking about earlier, there is support for the military presence in the Swat Valley, so that there is peace there. And some of the groups who had been supporting the military, now they want the transfer of power from the military to the local civil administration. Now, the challenge for the Pakistan government is that people like Malala, who mean no harm to the state at all, are allowed to enter the valley. Is that not how it's supposed to be and what it should be?
It's not only that. The Malala's book, I Am Malala, is banned, yet the private schools association, owner association, is not allowing the book to be kept in the schools. I myself organized a function when we were launching the book in Peshawar. It was banned. So there is a support or a fear of Taliban in the area, and there might be some support in the mainstream political parties as well. So we know that support eroded when 2 years ago Army Public School was attacked, and then Charsada University was attacked. So our military came out with Zarb-e-Az, that is an operation against the terrorists. Right. And those political parties even had to shun their support for the Taliban and other extremists. So situation changed after that operation, basically, and people have a faith, great faith in their army. They think if the Pak army does not allow the terrorists, no one can peep into Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or Swat. So they would like that the military continues the operation, and a national narrative against extremism should be followed, and terrorists should be dealt with, not only by the civilian institutions, but the military as well, in tandem. And the civilian institutions which are in Swat, which were eroded, they must be strengthened, and also those courts which did not convict yet many terrorists, the anti-terrorist court should come out with speedy decisions against them, and they must not be allowed to return to the valley.
Right, Professor Khan, valid points there being made by you. The challenge still remains. We might have seen those beautiful visuals from the Swat Valley of the skiing and the lovely snow there, picturesque mountains as well. But the challenge remains, the threat looms of the Taliban with those sporadic attacks, targeted attacks rather, on the people in the valley. I thank you so much, Professor Sarfaraz Khan, also Taha Siddiqui, for joining us here on the show and sharing your inputs. We're taking a short break here on Gravitas. When we return, Morocco bans the burqa ostensibly for security reasons. Will it work? We discuss that in a few minutes. Stay with us.